What if I told you that in the middle of an ordinary week, on a street you could walk with your eyes closed, someone simply stopped existing? No scream, no struggle, no witness who could say what they saw. Just a life that used to be there and then, nothing. Imagine the quiet folding in on itself, like a photograph slowly losing color. At first, everyone believed it was a mistake, a scheduling mix-up, a trip taken without a call. But then, things didn't add up. Mail piling up, a coffee cup left on the counter, a front door unlocked and empty. And here's the part that chills you. When the police checked the obvious places, the obvious clues were missing. Important items gone, but no sign of forced entry. Footprints that stopped mid-sidewalk. Cameras that saved over the file with nothing in it. I spent months talking to the neighbors, the officers, the barista who last saw them. I followed timelines, and I sat through long silences where people tried to make sense of what they felt, but couldn't say. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through that morning. The slow realization that something was terribly wrong, the early assumptions that fell apart, and the unanswered questions that the town still whispers about at dusk. And believe me, this story doesn't end with neat conclusions. It ends with a silence that keeps echoing. I want to begin with the morning that looked like any other. The town wakes up in a rhythm, a whistle from the bakery at 7, the school bus chewing up gravel, the hardware store door swinging open with its familiar creak. People nod as they pass each other on the sidewalk, because here you know the faces, and knowing feels safe. The person who would disappear lived in one of those faces. They had a morning routine that everybody could describe without thinking. They jogged past the park at 6:30. They stopped for a black coffee at the corner shop, no sugar, 1 cream. They waved to the florist who arranged peonies at the same counter every Tuesday. Their mailbox always had 1 or 2 envelopes, bills paid through the usual autopay. Nothing dramatic, nothing to suggest anyone would take them away. On the night before they vanished, they walked home with groceries. They locked the door, or so everyone assumed. They went to bed like a person who planned to wake up in the same weather, in the same town. So when the disappearance was noticed, it felt impossible. The first person to notice was the barista. He said, "I didn't see them come in." That was odd, because they were almost religious about that Tuesday coffee. The shop had a camera above the counter, but for some reason, the footage from that morning had a gap. 11 minutes of black at a time, when the shop was usually busy. The owner thought it was a camera hiccup. The barista thought maybe they stopped at the bakery first. Their sister thought maybe they overslept. The police arrived with notebooks and calm voices. Small-town detectives know how to keep a steady face. Their first assumption was ordinary and reasonable. A missing person who left voluntarily. Adults leave all the time. Midlife changes, arguments, the need to reset. They interviewed friends, checked bank accounts, traced phone pings. The last ping came from a block away, then nothing. No activity on credit cards, no messages. The assumption shifted from voluntary departure to a possible accident. Could they have had a fall? Could they have wandered into a river? Where bodies appear, there are usually traces. Clothing and brush, a shoe by the bridge. Here, there was none. Neighbors started to realize The daily certainties were eroding. The mail carrier mentioned that the missing person's mail was still in the box the next day. The neighbor who did the lawn work said the porch light was still on, even though this person always turned it off. The child's bike that usually leaned against the porch that morning was gone. Little things stacked up until they couldn't be ignored. Rumors began to swell. Someone claimed to have seen a strange car the night before, license plates half remembered. Another person said they'd heard voices in the alley around midnight, but when the police asked for details, the voices melted into uncertainty. The investigators ran the usual checks. They looked at the home for signs of struggle. None. No blood, no overturned furniture. A family photo still sat on the mantel. Keys were on the table. The front door had no pry marks. If someone left voluntarily, why leave everything behind? If someone took them, why make it look like nothing happened? The paradox pushed detectives to question their first assumptions. Hunches were replaced by holes in the timeline. Then there was the evidence that wasn't evidence. There was supposed to be a surveillance feed from a gas station at the end of the main road. The system kept recordings for 7 days. The owner swore the camera worked. But when detectives pulled the footage, there was nothing for the crucial hours. He told them a hard drive malfunctioned. The hard drive, however, had been replaced 3 weeks earlier. That replacement wasn't recorded in the chain of custody. Small-town shops don't always follow careful storage protocols. Technology, it turned out, could be messy or convenient, depending on whom you asked. People wanted answers and found only contradictions. The missing person's phone was pinged by the carrier until noon. After that, no signal. Yet, the phone itself did not register movement that would indicate it had been turned on and off. If someone had taken the phone, they might have been able to spoof location, but there was no sign of that either. The police asked for access to the missing person's social media. There were no last posts, no heated messages, nothing that would suggest conflict or planned departure. It was as if the person had simply been removed from the orbit of everyday life. In small towns, people know each other's rhythms. You learn the sound of someone's laugh through the wall. You know when they get the mail because their car is in the driveway. That's why a disappearance here isn't only a crime scene. It's a rupture in living memory. Friends retrace their last known interactions. One friend said they had breakfast at 8 on Monday and everything was normal. Another said they texted at 9:30 and received a smiley face. A neighbor said their trash cans sat full the next morning, as though no one had taken them out. Ordinary acts, trash, laundry, taking the dog for a walk, become the map that investigators use to reassemble a life. Then the town learned about a missing jacket. It had been seen earlier in the week, draped over a chair at a community center. Later, it was gone. At first, this seemed like a small detail, but the jacket had a frayed cuff that the missing person had mentioned to a close friend a month earlier. It was distinctive. The friend described it in detail to a local reporter, and suddenly the jacket became a symbol, a concrete absence that made the absence feel unbearable. People began leaving candles and flowers where the jacket had been last seen. The community held vigils, and those vigils started to fill the gaps that official timelines could not explain. Investigators followed standard procedure. They compiled a timeline, documented every sighting, and cross-checked with phone data. They interviewed everyone who might have seen something. They canvassed houses, knocked on doors, and listened to the oddities. A retired teacher said they had seen the missing person leave their house at dawn, carrying nothing. A teenager claimed she saw a delivery truck parked where it shouldn't have been. But none of these accounts fit neatly together. Witness testimony is a fragile thing. Memory is not a camera. It is affected by time, by expectation, by the desire to be helpful. The police knew that. They also knew that in cases like this, you can't wait for a confession. You have to interpret absence. As days became weeks, the initial police assumptions began to crumble. The voluntary exit theory lost plausibility. The accident theory had no physical evidence, and then there were signs that someone had deliberately tried to erase the trail. Items that might have been useful to investigators were missing from supposedly locked places. A hard copy notebook that contained a list of appointments was gone from the kitchen drawer. The town's network of neighbors, usually a protective web, shattered into suspicion. Who had the keys? Who had noticed the missing items first? People started watching each other more closely, and in that watching, they revealed old resentments and small secrets. Local law enforcement requested help from outside agencies. When federal agents came in, they brought a different kind of procedure: photographs, forensics, a sweep of digital records. They found that some timestamps on municipal cameras had been altered, either by error or intentionally. It was impossible to know. The lab reports took weeks. Meanwhile, the town held its breath. The missing person's name became a quiet liturgy in conversations. Not shouted, just spoken with the weight of disbelief. Rumors are the first thing to grow in a vacuum. They thrive on what we don't know. Some said the missing person had been seen with someone they shouldn't have been. Others whispered about old debts and shadowy deals. A handful of people suggested the obvious crime thrillers: abduction for ransom, a lover's quarrel turned dark, a planned disappearance to start anew. But for every rumor, there was a neighbor who countered it with memory. Remember how they loved that plant? Remember how they saved for a trip next spring? The more people tried to anchor the person to something, the more the story resisted simplification. I remember sitting in the kitchen of the missing person's sister, watching her fold laundry that still smelled faintly of soap. She told me how the missing person always left a small glass jar with spare change by the sink, like a ritual of small savings. That jar was still on the counter. It felt obscene not to have answers, to live each day with that jar there, collecting coins that couldn't buy back what was gone. She said, "People keep asking if I think they left. I keep answering no, because I would notice. I would have felt it." And then she looked down and said, "But I might be wrong." That line, "but I might be wrong," was where grief met doubt. Families adapt in strange ways. They create timelines on corkboards, pinning receipts, photos, and post-it notes. They set up tents of hope and scaffolds of evidence. They call detectives again and again, as if repetition might force a different answer. Investigators try to give them structure, explain what steps they're taking, which leads they're following. But structure doesn't heal the emptiness. It only provides a map with missing roads. One of the most haunting aspects of this disappearance was the silence of surveillance. In a world saturated with cameras, you'd expect answers. But camera angles can be deceiving. A camera trained on a corner might miss the side alley where a person stopped to tie a shoe. A camera's clock might be off by minutes that matter. And systems can fail at exactly the wrong time. That absence of footage became a quiet accusation. Either the cameras failed by coincidence or someone engineered the failure. Both options are unsettling. I want to talk about the small human moments that the paperwork couldn't capture. A woman who owned the bakery told me she wrote the missing person's name on the chalkboard under today's specials, just to make the space feel occupied. A high school teacher walked the corridor and paused by an empty desk. She left a sticky note that said, "Come back." A mail carrier who'd delivered for 20 years cried in his truck because he'd known this person since they were small. These gestures didn't change the outcome, but they mattered. They kept the missing person's existence palpable, not just a case number. The investigation eventually produced a few fragments of clarity. A witness from a distant town reported seeing a person matching the missing person's description in a gas station restroom, late on the day of the disappearance. The description was tentative. Clothing lined up imperfectly. The hair cut a little differently. It was a thread to pull. But when detectives traveled, they found nothing conclusive. A scent dog traced a trail to a nearby wood, then lost it. A digital forensics analyst recovered a deleted file from a laptop, an unsent message drafted but never sent. The draft said, "I need to tell you something." The name that followed was not of a lover, but of a friend. The thought of what that unsent sentence could have meant made people's throats tight. Months passed. The town settled into a new rhythm, an anxious, watchful rhythm. People resumed their grocery runs and their morning coffees, but there was a carefulness now when doors clicked shut, as if everyone was listening for the sound of a life returning. There were community meetings where officials updated the public with careful language. There were interviews on late-night shows where armchair detectives offered plans that the police politely dismissed. There were vigils on the anniversary when candles made a constellation of unanswered questions. What remains most important is not the list of leads that climbed and then collapsed. It's the way the town changed. Trust, which had been an unremarked part of daily life, had been taxed. Eyes that met used to carry the assumption of safety. Now, they held the weight of watching. Children asked their parents if people can just vanish. The answer was a stammered reassurance and an admission that sometimes life doesn't give you answers. If there's a takeaway here, it's this. Disappearances are not only investigations. They are concentrated grief. They are tests of how a community remembers a life. We talk about evidence, about timelines, about forensics, and those matter. But we also have to look at the way people keep a presence alive with memory. That matters too. There are still questions that ache. Why were the recordings missing from specific cameras at precise times? Who removed that notebook from the drawer? Did someone intentionally mislead investigators? Are the gaps in the timeline simple human error, or do they point to something more deliberate? I can't answer that for you. No one can, not yet. What I can tell you is how silence looks. It looks like a chair left empty at a family table. It looks like a coffee cup in the sink that will never again be rinsed by that hand. It looks like people who used to pass each other on the sidewalk now pausing, searching faces for the shape of that neighbor who is no longer there. Silence holds weight. Silence keeps asking questions we can't stop asking. If you've listened this far and you feel the pull to help, there are things you can do. Share this story, not with the breathless tone of conspiracy, but with the careful respect of someone who knows a life is missing. If you have information, no matter how small it seems, contact the local authorities. Memory and detail often come back slowly. A scrap of information can break open a case. Most of all, remember that behind every unresolved disappearance is a family living with the ache of uncertainty. Their need for answers is urgent and everyday. If you want more deep, careful examinations of unresolved cases like this one, stories that avoid flashy speculation and focus on what we can know, then subscribe and turn on notifications. Leave a comment with your questions or your observations. I read them. Share this video with someone who appreciates sober, realistic storytelling. This story ends for now with unanswered questions, with evidence that sits like a bruise, with the town moving forward while holding a space open for what might come back. The person who vanished is not just a file. They were a neighbor, a morning walker, someone who loved a particular coffee. They are remembered in small things. They are remembered in silence, and that silence keeps echoing. Thank you for listening. Please be careful out there. Notice your neighbors. Check on the people whose routines you know. Sometimes noticing can mean the difference between a life that fades and a life that is found.